Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. And as we delve into this week's topic, a reminder that some of the content may be of a sensitive nature. Now, here's your hosts, Tim and Des.
Welcome to this week's Momentum. It is wonderful to have you tuning in. Thanks so much for spending some time with Tim and Des again this week as we step into this week's show. And I'm super excited about this week's show, but we'll get to that in just a moment. Let's throw to the man himself, Mr. Des Kennedy. How are you this week?
The man himself. That's really cool. I love getting that sort of accolation. It's really cool. It's really interesting, what we do with Momentum. We had a guy this week who contacted us from Brisbane, and he's come to the end of himself. He's had a really great life, and then all of a sudden his life has taken a bad turn, and we get to deal with these sort of issues all the time, and it's such a blessing that we're able to do it. So it's such a great thing that you and I do, Tim. It's such an honor. That's great, Des. And you know what, the truth is that men and women do reach out to us fairly regularly at momentumaustralia.org. That's our website, and give us a scenario perhaps of what's happening in their life. Ask for some help, ask for some feedback, ask for some degree of connection. And we do want to encourage you to come to the website, momentumaustralia.org. And of course, there you'll see the care line, 1-800-000-636. If you need a confidential conversation about something that's happening in your world, you can do that with somebody on the care line. And of course, the YouTube channel as well. You might actually be watching us right now. We'll give you a smile and a wave. But look, it's great to be on all the platforms and spread momentum out there, and encourage you to do the same as well. If you're getting benefit and a blessing from the show and you're finding it useful, share it with your mates, because we all need to get connected as men. That's one of our hearts at Momentum. For most of us, having the sex talk with our parents was probably likely one of the most embarrassing interactions that we've ever had in our lives. In fact, some of us may have actually never had the talk with our parents because they were simply just too embarrassed to actually broach that subject with us. And that's certainly the truth for me. I never had that conversation with my mum and dad. And yet in today's... Explains a lot, Des. That's right. And yet in today's overtly sexualized society, with things like pornography, sexual content, sexting, being introduced to our kids at an earlier age, like 13 and younger, it is so important that we as parents are on the front foot rather than the back foot when it comes to educating our kids about this area of our lives. Dr. Patricia Weerakoon is an Australian Christian sexologist. She's also written several books, each focusing on a different aspect of sexuality. And she teaches that sex is a gift from God, looks at sexual ethics from a Christian worldview. She often speaks to Christian schools and conferences. In fact, I first met her at a church conference on Christian education, and she's our special guest on this week's Momentum. Welcome to the show, Patricia.
Wonderful to be with you. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. So great to have you here, Patricia. And from the videos that I've watched in preparation for this show, I just love the way that you are. You're so free. You're so light. Even now, it's like you're just lighting up that little space. I'm super excited to get into this because, as Des said, and for him, he didn't have the conversation with his parents. I remember my dad making a few comments around the way, but it was very awkward and clunky. And we discovered a lot of stuff by talking to our friends and all of that stuff. So we're going to unpack all of that in this week's show. PatriciaWeerakoon.com, by the way, is Patricia's website. Would encourage you to just jot that down and go and have a look at some stage. But Patricia, I am curious because I think you said you were 77 when we jumped on the call.
I'm 77 years old.
Congratulations. You look really well for 77. You look glowing. But tell me, how does somebody with respect at your age do this for their life? Like, how did this happen for you that you stepped into this space of talking about sex and sexuality and helping people, I suppose, explore this area? How does that happen?
Wouldn't anyone keep young if you're always talking about sex, right?
I guess so.
Anyway, how did I get into it? Let me just give you the quickie version. So I was born in Sri Lanka. Yeah. Very conservative Tamil Christian family in the tea plantations.
Wow.
And the only way I could get out of having an arranged marriage was to study really hard and go to university.
Wow.
I went to medical school basically so they wouldn't arrange a marriage for me. And did really well there and got a scholarship after medical school to study in Hawaii. And there I worked with a sexologist. At that time, we're talking 1980, one of the world's best known researchers in gender.
Wow.
Went back to Sri Lanka, by which time I had met and married my husband. And was a sexologist in Sri Lanka, very busy, 20 million population. Moved to Australia 38 years ago, and my son and husband and myself was an academic with Sydney Uni and developed programs in sexual health. And I was director of a graduate program in sexual health till I retired. And as old ladies do when they retire, I thought I'll be with my knitting. But I prayed to God and said, use me. And so, 7 books and multitudes of speaking engagements later, here am I, old gray-haired old lady, still speaking about sex. Why wouldn't you stay young?
So tell me, Patricia, just scooting back to that part of the story, when you got alongside the sexologist at that stage, you hadn't stepped into the space. What was it and what is it that still draws you to be in this space? Why do you think, for you particularly, it's important for you to be in this space?
Yeah, I realized very early when I was in Hawaii, I was studying the science of sex. And I was worshiping in a wonderful evangelical Baptist church. And I realized that, the world thinks sex is something that's easy and like objectified and to be used. Well, God has such a wonderful narrative. I tell young people, I said, the Bible is the best sex book I have ever read. From Genesis, the first book, to Revelation. And of course, Song of Songs in the middle book. What erotica. Yeah. So, it's just such a beautiful, good narrative of man and woman and one flesh. So I realized that I could bring my twin passions of God and sex together. And ever since, I haven't stopped being excited about my twin passions.
I mean, it's interesting what we're talking about today. And I mentioned earlier the fact that my mum and dad, who are both Christians, they were embarrassed, or they didn't want to talk about educating me on sex and what's good and what's bad and what works and what doesn't work. And so there's probably a lot of parents, Christian or not, who are in that same camp, who just are embarrassed to have that conversation. So I guess we should start with the basics. And what is it that makes us uncomfortable about talking about sex?
Well, a couple of things. You already started it by saying this, that no one talked to you about it.
Yeah.
So if your parents haven't talked about it, we talk about children building scripts, a script in their mind.
Yeah.
So when they're building scripts from a very young age, you and even young people who are now parents of children, they were not taught.
No.
And so they grow up getting these scripts that sex is something that is not talked about to the children.
Yes.
And unfortunately, we are seeing a generation of parents coming up who got their information from social media and even pornography. And so that's another thing. One, you haven't got good scripts, and 2, you got unhealthy scripts. So all of this will prevent you from actually talking to your children. And then you think, maybe if I talk to them, they're going to run out and start practicing sex.
Yes.
And the reality is that is so wrong. The research clearly tells us that if the children have heard from someone who is an authority figure, especially a parent, early in life, they actually put off having sex and taking risks. This is secular research. Parents, grandparents, you mentioned parents, but grandparents have a very important role in speaking to their grandchildren. A lot of grandparents spend more time with the kids, even grandchildren, than the parents do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Speaking to men, uncle, you have a duty. It's not just parents. Every person has a role in nurturing young people.
So we should actually just repeat that, because what you said was actually really huge, right? That if a parent or an authority figure has the conversation with a child at a young age, the child is less likely then to act out sexually when they reach that age. I mean, that is huge.
Yes.
Because I think for a lot of us as well, we kind of have the opposite. The myth is that if we talk to our kids too early about sex, they're going to go and run off and want to try and experiment.
Yes.
And you're saying, actually, no, statistics show exactly the opposite.
Correct. And also it shows that if the parents and grandparents have talked, and aunties, uncles have provided that safe place for the child, if the child, something was to happen, like the child is exposed to porn or even some abuse, they will come.
They're more likely to share that.
The parent
Yes.
or to the grandparent. That's extremely important in today's culture.
Yes, that's something we don't think
huge.
about at all. That is absolutely so key, because there's so much abuse and so much evil in the world, if it gets said that way. That the parents and those father figures or those elderly, respected people, need to have that access. Yeah.
Well, I guess it's fostering that relationship early, isn't it? It's fostering that safe place that you can go to that adult and they're not going to shoot you down or clam up or make it awkward. Like you're building that relationship, that open relationship at an early age. So then my question then, Patricia, is then how early can we start that conversation, right? I mean, how early is too early? Is there a too early? Like how early do as adults start to talk about this stuff with our kids?
It is never too early to talk to kids. And I believe that most of your audience are men. So I think one of the things is that men tend to leave these early conversations to the moms. And that is so wrong.
Yeah.
Because, and you think, I can never talk to my daughter. Hello, if your daughter grows up and decides to get married, the chances are she's going to marry a man.
Yeah,
and you
right.
are the first man in her life.
Yes.
Right.
You need to be the role model.
Yes, that's
you
true.
need to be the voice in her life. And your son is going to grow up. And if you are not the role model, you know where he's going to look? E-Safety Commissioner just published a research. And it tells us, interestingly, that young men, and they talked to over 100 men between 16 and 21, and they said the majority of men said that they get their identity from online influencers.
Wow.
How pathetic is that?
Yeah, exactly.
So men from a very early age, and the question being how early? Never too early. And I tell people, when your child is old enough to say, these are my fingers and these are my toes, your son should also learn to say, and this is my penis and this is my scrotum. It's just another part of the body.
Yeah.
And your daughter should, be learning about the vagina, the vulva, just body parts like everything else. The right words for the body are important, particularly in today's culture of the transgender phenomenon.
Yes.
When people are finding it difficult, even politicians and health professionals, to even say, what is a woman? We need to be teaching our children very early that it is a good thing to be a boy. It is a good thing to be a girl. We have a book called You and Me by the Book, which is a picture book, which we encourage parents to read with children who are preschool.
Yeah. It's such a good conversation. We're going to take a short break and come back with Dr. Patricia Weerakoon on this week's Momentum. I think we're all getting a sex education on this week's show to some degree, which is fantastic. But a lot of stuff we're talking about today, let's be honest, it's relevant for us as parents, and we really hope you're getting something from this week's show. We're going to take a short break and come back with Dr. Patricia Weerakoon. In the meantime, check out her website, patriciaweerakoon.com, and of course, our website, momentumaustralia.org. We'll be back with Momentum in just a moment. Stay tuned.
This is Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. Find out more at momentumaustralia.org.
If this program has highlighted something you'd like prayer for, we'd love to pray for you. Call 1-800-PRAY-FOR-ME. That's 1-800-772-936. It's a free call. Or text 0401 132 888.
You're listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. Find out more at momentumaustralia.org.
Okay, welcome back to part 2 of this week's Momentum. We're having a great time on this week's show with Dr. Patricia Weerakoon. We're talking dads and sex education, but I think it's just sex education in general. And Des and I are learning some stuff, and that says something about us at our age as well. But we've got Dr. Patricia Weerakoon with us on this week's show. Patricia, I just want to scoot back to something you said at the end of the first part of the show, which was about actually getting our kids to use the proper names for their genitalia, right? For their genitals. And I saw you in a video outside of this conversation talk about the fact that that's really important. And often as parents, we get a little embarrassed, so we give our kids that little cutesy name for their genitals as opposed to the actual names, like the penis and the scrotum, etc. Why is that important to use the actual names at a very young age with our kids?
Well, there's at least two reasons. There's many, but I tell parents, your son has a penis and scrotum. He doesn't have a dick, a willy, or a Kevin, or whatever you call it. And your daughter has a vagina, vulva. Don't call it front holes or bickies or something. Give it the right words. Why? At least two reasons. One is your children need a language to talk to you. And the other one is they could see something which frightens them. And unless you have told them that this is genitals and it's important and it's precious, why do they need this language? And somebody could show them pornography. And let's face it, the average age of first porn exposure is about 10 years and dropping. I have sat with 8-year-old children who are compulsive porn users.
Oh, wow.
And so I had a little boy talk to me how he was looking for a project. He was looking for cute pussycats for a project and ended up on a porn site. So you give them the right words, they get to come and tell you, I saw this or that. So I tell you, I saw bickies. What does that mean? The second reason is that some children, there may be some kind of abuse or someone touching them. Again, they have the language and you have already told them. You see, children, if you haven't told them, they think that if something happens, it's their fault. So you need to be telling them, it's not your fault if something happens or you see porn. It's that other person's fault, or it's the pornography that's the problem. You can always come to me. And now you got the words to tell me. That's why some of the reasons why it's important.
It is so important, and I really like the idea that we talk to kids as early as we can. I like the idea where if you can count your fingers and count your toes, that's a good indicator of, when you should start to educate. And I guess there's levels of education. I mean, the first one obviously is to identify the organs and so forth, and call them by their name. So what would be the next step after that?
Yeah, by the time they get to primary school, you parents and grandparents need to be talking to them clearly about their brain development. I know you're thinking primary, talk about the brain. Yes, because they can understand that they have an emotional brain and a control brain and, self-control, and like you don't live by your emotions. You need to teach these things very early. So teaching them about the brain, teaching them building on how precious their bodies are, and they are clearly boy or girl, because in primary school, now our children are being taught gender fluidity. So we need to be preempting that.
Yes.
Dads, you need to be that role model. Uncles, grandparents, you need to be there, especially with your boys, teaching them what it means to be a boy, that there are many ways to be a boy, that there are some boys who are gentle and musical and like wearing pink. And then there are other boys who are like the ones who like to get out there and have the rough and tumble. And similarly with the girls, but especially with your boys, nurture them. So we need to be talking about the body, the brain. We need to be talking to our family children, the primary schoolers, about the types of families that they are likely to see. Otherwise, they come home and say, how can so-and-so have 2 dads or 2 moms? So we need to be talking. So those are basics: body, brain, family. And then we also need to talk to them something about basic sexuality. Mommy, daddy, where do babies come from? Please do not tell them the babies came out of your umbilicus. Teach them there too simple facts.
Yes. So is it clearly better for the parents, the mum and dad, to do that education rather than a friend or something external to that? And how do parents who have left it later a bit, how do they start to have that conversation?
It's always so much of fun because this is something I get asked. I haven't talked to my son or daughter. Usually it's super traditional family.
Yeah.
Didn't even realize I need to do it. What do I do? What do I do? And I said, look, the first thing is, look, you need to have some opening there. And so you need to show your children that you are interested in their life. So first get a connection. You can't sit your son down at 15 and 16 and say, okay, I want to talk to you about sex. He's going to run out of the room or say, are you going off your head today? So you need a connection.
Yeah.
So ask them about their life, ask them about their friends and social media. Talk to them. Have any of your friends, talked about, these kind of ugly pictures and things, these sexual pictures? What about, I've heard about boys and girls sending pictures to each other, sexting. Has that ever happened? So look what's living in their world. Make that an entry to the conversation.
Yeah.
And of course, at the expense of repeating that we have books for everything, we do have a book for puberty called Growing Up by the Book and a book for teens called Teen Sex by the Book. So there are, and these are my books, but there's lots of other good resources out there. So get yourself a resource and just, main thing is just do it.
Have the conversation.
Yes.
Yeah, just go ahead and have the conversation.
Patricia, I want to perhaps end on I want to go back to pornography because I think it is such a huge thing in today's society and for our kids. And as you just said, I think the average age is about 10 when kids are exposed, but you've had people as young as 8. And I think there are probably younger than that as well. Let's say that there will be some listening who are right. They're on the track. They've had the conversation, the pornography, masturbation thing. There'll be other parents who are going, I suspect my 15-year-old son who's locking himself away for extended periods of time in either his bedroom or his bathroom or something, like there's probably something else happening there. How do we try and broach that conversation if traditionally we haven't had that conversation and we have a reasonable relationship, but perhaps behavior has changed and we're sensing, or we've even found something that's been left in the internet history or whatever. How do we broach that with our kids?
Yeah, the first thing I would say to parents is do not freak. Do not say, how could you do this to me? What have you been doing? Don't. Because that's the surest way of creating shame and guilt and further hiding of what they are doing.
Yes.
So don't shame and guilt the child. But you are the parent. And therefore, it is your right to keep the child accountable to you about any action. So the important thing is to just approach the child, and especially if he or she, we can't just assume it's the boys. We have now increasing number of girls who are watching pornography. You just call the child and say, look, I'm concerned about this. I love you. And I just want to explore whether anything is happening. What's happening? Are you watching anything? Or I saw this. I am not blaming you. I want to help you. So right from the beginning, take away the blame and therefore reduce the shame and the guilt. But be the one who says, I don't blame you. I want to help you. And then talk to them, if it's a 15-year-old, the dangers of porn. Talk to them about what it's doing to their brain. Talk to them the fact that pornography is not just something playful, that it is actually a form of sex slavery often to the women who are being used. Talk to them about what porn will do to their future in terms of relationships. So talk to them about the science and the what it's doing to them. Then you say, look, I want to help you. So let's work out ways that you can work through this. Because by which time they begin to understand, this is really not good for me. Do it in small stages. So don't sort of dump everything. Do it slowly. Be the supportive parent who walks with them. Look, you can put all the external filters and accountability software, but finally, it's an internal filter. And if you're listening to this as a Christian parent, a Christian father, your role modeling is extremely important. So if you are tempted to use porn, first thing is you need to draw back.
Yes.
And then speak to your child and give them the better narrative for sex. Because porn gives them a very poor, perverted narrative. Give them God's good story for sex.
It's good. It's great. I mean, there's so much in this week's show. We'll have to bring it to a close because we're out of time. But our special guest has been Dr. Patricia Weerakoon. And it seems like there's a book for everything, which is fantastic because let's be honest, as parents, this is a tricky subject to navigate. And any help that we can put in our own lap with regards to helping our kids in this area is a great thing to do. Patricia, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. I'm sure we'll get you back on the show because there's lots more that we can explore in this space. But thanks so much for your time today with Momentum.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
You've been listening to Momentum, a show that helps men succeed in life. For more information or to hear this week's show again, go to momentumaustralia.org. You can also access a whole range of resources to help you on your journey and to get in touch with the team at momentumaustralia.org. Until next time, keep moving forward with Momentum.